So this question says, my 7-year-old daughter will only wear one outfit 24/7, including evenings. How can we help her work through this and expand her wardrobe to include a few more choices?
So I think a big piece of it is thinking about what is it about that outfit that your daughter really likes. Is it the color? Is it the texture? Is it the smell? And really kind of thinking through what are the pieces of that outfit that you can help expand and give her more options that are of similar feelings, textures, experiences that help expand her wardrobe choices a little bit.
Yeah, things that are kind of meeting the same need that her current outfit is meeting for her.
Oh, you got
Did you guys hear what Erin said? No. Okay.
I was just saying that we want to think about what is it about that outfit that your child really likes to wear? Is it the feel of the material? Is it the how close fitting to the body or how loose on her? Is it the smell? Have you changed detergents recently? It's thinking about all of those sensory pieces and thinking about kind of what's the experience of wearing that clothing for her. I think we can all think about certain materials that we wear or don't wear or prefer to wear. We've all got our favorite outfits. So how do we help expand out some of those choices?
I think better understanding what the current preferences are, and maybe there's something else about that too. There could be the sensory piece that Erin was talking about. Maybe it's an awesome dinosaur shirt. Maybe there's something we can better understand what it is that is kind of motivating her to want to wear that outfit, and then understanding that will help us to develop a plan that will still meet the same needs that the current outfit is meeting, because it's meeting some need for her. And so figuring out what is that, or what are those things, and then we can better understand how to move forward.
I think too that this isn't a small issue. It may sound small to someone when you say, oh, she only has one shirt that she'll wear. It sort of is a surface issue, a lot like what Carla was talking about with food, is that there's a lot of underlying things to think about, and it's okay to ask for help or ask for an OT to weigh in on thinking through all of the underlying pieces that we're talking about here. It may be something that could be a process to help out with that.
Ready for the next? Okay. All right, next question is, our son has verbal apraxia and ASD. We have him enrolled in prompt therapy, speech therapy, and here at CASC learning to also communicate on his tablet. He has said up to 60 words, gestures, and tries to talk. My questions are, 1, is there still hope he will talk? He is 5 years old. And 2, is there anything more we can do to assist him in learning how to overcome apraxia? Thank you.
I think I'll start. And I'm a speech pathologist, and so I appreciate that question very much. I think that's a lot of things to think about, and I think first I'm struck by all the good things that are happening to support your child already. The question of will my child talk is a big one, and I don't think any of us have that answer, especially not meeting your child. I think the things that you're doing are helping to support any growth that you will see. And communication doesn't have to be just verbal. So if I heard your question, you said they were saying some words, 60 words?
60 words.
That's wonderful. And I think, the things that you can do to keep building upon that are exactly what you're doing, using visual supports. A tablet is one of many speech generating devices that are available, and I think I had a thought and it's gone. Just the continuation of offering opportunity to communicate even non-verbally and reinforcing how important that is will help support any verbal communication that you will see grow. I think it's really important that you're continuing to see this as a developmental process, and it doesn't mean that an age means that it is out of the question to continue. So I don't want to ever say that a child will never use verbal words, because we've seen that. So we keep working on things that will help them communicate now. So CASC is a great one that came up, so thank you. Anybody else here?
Okay. Yep.
My son had apraxia, and he's now in high school and does speak a lot. He had trouble uttering sounds, and it really helped to rock like a swinging motion. And so for about a year, we sang a lot of songs while he was swinging, and it really opened up his ability to just make sounds. So I just wanted to add that as a possibility that you might want to use movement in addition to just any vocalization whatsoever.
Okay. Could people hear that? Or
You probably should repeat it for the
yeah,
camera,
but
too.
somebody was adding that her son, who has apraxia, has benefited over the years too from incorporating movement. Did you say swinging? And swinging is another way to encourage and help promote language, correct?
And just get them excited about movement and making any vocalizations.
Yeah, and so in promoting more excitement and in creating movement to promote making sounds, correct? Anyone else? Oh, back there.
My dad was a preteen, and he didn't talk until at least age 4. But by high school, he was the star of the football team. Everybody thought he was fine, so he might just work his way up.
Okay, and so somebody back. Oh, go ahead. 67. So 60, 70 years ago, shared that that your father was a preemie and was late to talk, but grew to be the star basketball player in high school, and so that's wonderful. Anyone else? Oh, yep.
The question I want to ask you is that can you tell us what kind of challenges do people with autism have nowadays?
So the question is, what kind of challenges do people with autism have nowadays?
Yes.
Okay, and that's for the panel.
So, I mean, that's certainly a big topic, and I think we've hit on a couple of the challenges that individuals with autism can face today. We've talked a little bit about some of the feeding challenges, concerns around safety. You know, when we think broadly with individuals who have autism, there's difficulty functioning in regards to their social interactions and social relationships, and that can permeate a number of areas of life. So for any individual with autism, we want to be sure we're thinking broadly about where the areas of support might be for that person, and that can look very different for individual to individual. The diagnosis of autism doesn't specify, you know, that each person's going to have the same challenges. So as clinicians, that's one of the main focuses when we're meeting with an individual is, you know, what is this person's needs? What are the challenges they're facing? And thinking broadly about how to support those. And that changes over time too, right? So the challenges an individual faces when they're 2 will look different when they're 6 and then when they move into adulthood. But kind of generalities, we think about difficulties in terms of interacting socially, communicating, challenges around some of the sensory concerns. We've mentioned today some difficulties with rigidity or repetitive behaviors. These are broad strokes in terms of some of the challenges we see in autism, but I would kind of go back to the idea that this is not a one-size-fits-all thing, and we really need to think broadly about that individual as a person, their social context, their family context, their life, and be really individualized in terms of how we're supporting them.
Thank you. All right, I'll go to the next question because we still have a few and we want to get to as many as possible. So this one says, I have a 16-year-old on this autism spectrum. In the last couple of years, his fear of germs has become very prominent. He washes his hands until his skin is raw and irritated and needs to be treated. He won't touch doorknobs, desks, or keyboards at school, etc. It's becoming difficult to cope with everyday life. Can you offer any advice?
It's hard with just a limited amount of information to be able to speak really specifically to that question, but certainly we would really encourage the family to reach out to a provider to get some additional support around that. We know, and that could be starting with a pediatrician who then can give a referral for someone like a psychologist or another specialist. I don't know if we've talked about this resource center yet, but you could, another place to call to get resources for places to go for support around behavior or mental health or things like that can be calling the resource center here. And I'm holding up this purple brochure because that's where the phone number is. You can call and we'll have these, we can give that information later. But we know with autism there can be a lot of comorbid or coexisting things that individuals might be experiencing, whether that's anxiety or ADHD or there's a number of other things that can be coexisting with autism that might require different treatment. And so I think it would be really, really important to consult with a medical provider or psychologist or other appropriate personnel about those specific questions, because certainly we could think about some treatment that might be really important and helpful for the family to help meet those concerns.
I think that kind of the broader piece of that question, though, is I think anytime you're experiencing something getting worse or getting more challenging or more difficult for both the person that you love or for your family, that's the time that you want to think about who can I reach out to for additional support. So whether it's, even if this isn't your specific challenge that you're dealing with, it's really thinking about who do I turn to when things are feeling harder than usual. And that's where I think going to your pediatrician, going to any support services that you have, certainly reaching out to a case manager if you have one, or calling our regional center or any of the other regional centers, depending on where you're located in the state.
Thank you. All right, next question is around food. At what point would medical intervention like a G-tube be taken with a child who has very restricted diet? How long can a child go with only eating one food? What other interventions can help with nutrition intake?
So that's a really challenging question, and there is no one answer to that. I would start with kind of the caveat that a G-tube is obviously a very intensive, very invasive intervention, and with any intervention you want to think about weighing the risks and the benefits of that intervention. So this goes all the way from therapy supports, school supports, to medical intervention. You want to think about, what am I trading off here in terms of risks and benefits? And with an intervention like a G-tube, you have to weigh that very carefully. So I would kind of go back to before we would get to a place of considering a G-tube and think about some of those other interventions that are so important in addressing feeding. We heard about a number of them this morning, a number of considerations this morning with Carla's talk, but you want to have a interdisciplinary team who's thinking about why is feeding such a challenge for this child, and thinking about a really comprehensive plan to support the child's nutrition and feeding. So that would include thinking about your pediatrician obviously being involved to consider your child's health and growth, thinking about having nutritionists involved to think about areas where maybe the child is not fully meeting their nutritional needs, having occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, physical therapists involved depending on where the challenges are arising. Is it around, as we heard this morning, thinking about sensory concerns, motor concerns, safety with swallowing. So wanting to have a really broad look at why feeding is such a challenge and start to address those pieces to the extent that it's possible. And obviously getting to a position of considering a G-tube would need to come after thought about why this is such an issue, and hopefully having the opportunity to really maximize all other interventions before moving to a surgical intervention, because that, as I mentioned, is an invasive step, and we'd want to try to maximize all those other supports before we get to a place of thinking about surgical intervention for feeding. Yeah, thank you for the reminder, Kelly. We here at the Waisman Center, we do have a feeding team as part of our Autism and Developmental Disabilities Clinic, where patients who have particular challenges in feeding can meet with an interdisciplinary team to really tease apart that question of why is feeding so tough, and start to direct some intervention to the underlying causes. And again, kind of in a consultative role, think about what's our big picture plan, and then help families get set up with moving forward to addressing those needs on an individualized basis. So that's certainly one option for for exploring an interdisciplinary approach. But even if you're not able to be coming here for services due to distance or whatever the case may be, thinking about assembling your interdisciplinary team where you are. And I would, often starting with your pediatrician would be the place to begin, and they can help you with pulling together the people who need to be involved in evaluating and supporting your child's feeding.
I can also jump in, Katie. If coming to the Waisman Center is an option, Children's Hospital of Wisconsin in Milwaukee also has a feeding team, and if you're in the Rockford area, there's a feeding clinic at the Swedish American Hospital.
Okay. Next question. We have a boy with high-functioning ASD who turns 10 in February. He struggles to follow simple directions without reminders. We've tried positive reinforcement, earning screen time for 2 or less reminders, as well as negative consequences, taking toys away, early bedtime. But we continue to have daily struggles with simple and expected tasks. We developed a set of house rules and what it looks like. Do you have any suggestions, guidance, resources for this issue?
Again, it's wonderful. These questions are excellent questions, and I think there are no easy answers to give you, but we hope we can offer just a few thoughts. And I wonder if I didn't think of that part. But as a speech pathologist, I'm thinking when I heard, well, we've given the directions, I start to wonder, do they understand those directions? Because, I think we often overlook receptive language or understanding language, and we assume that that's happening successfully all the time, and it may be that that's a part of the challenge. And so my favorite thing is visual support. So I think, how can we make our house rules visual? How can we create something that if they're a reader, then we have rules posted. If they're not a reader yet, we may add some pictures to that, but that's one piece of it, and I know there's a ton of other things as well. So.
I was going to add, that what makes it difficult to answer these too is, not knowing the specifics and what's been looked at. But so for anybody, if you're struggling with anything, again, and we've said it several times, it's talking to your team, whether it's school, doctors, and really having somebody help you break down what's at the root of that. Because, is it that the child's not understanding the directions? Is there, motor difficulties? Is the child developmentally at a place where whatever those, even though they might be expected tasks, are they appropriate for that child? So that's where really consulting with people who, an interdisciplinary team who can help you problem solve around that to make it more successful for your child and for yourself.
So I was going to say that a lot of those things, but that's okay. I also was thinking I think in the question it was 2 steps that was the problem, and maybe reinforcing it, following 1 step first and then gradually going to 2 steps, because maybe it's the 2 that makes it harder. So using visuals, but also incorporating positive reinforcement for doing 1 thing first and then going to 2 and hopefully 3.
I think the other thing to think about is I think sometimes we forget about all the supports that we build in for ourselves. And thinking about who's got a to-do list and a checklist and reminders and an alarm on your phone and notes stapled onto your keys and something written on your hand and all the ways that we remind ourselves to do things. Our kids with autism definitely need them more. And so really thinking through how are the ways that we remind ourselves to do things and trying some of those strategies as well, and thinking, can we automate some of those things? If I lost my phone, I think I would lose my mind. And I'm betting I'm not the only person in this room with that experience.
I think that, go ahead. I was just going to say really quick, the other thing I was thinking about what's going on in the environment, because we know for all of us, and especially younger kids, if there's other things in the environment that are distracting in terms of following directions, that can be a real barrier. We're never going to be more interesting than the TV, like in terms of giving directions. And so kind of thinking about if following directions is a real concern, are there things that we can do in the environment to make it more likely to be successful? Can we make sure we have their eye contact first? Can we have them turn the TV off or pause the movie that they're watching first before we give them a direction. Or there just might be some things to think about in the environment that we might be able to modify a little bit to increase the likelihood that there's going to be success in following directions.
Again, this would depend a little bit on the child's understanding and their ability to understand the directions, but assuming that they can understand the directions you're giving, one thought I had was thinking about involving them in the process of developing those house rules. You know, there are certain things that are absolutes in terms of rules in the house, but there are definitely some things where we could be more flexible and involve the child in terms of the decision-making process. So maybe if the morning is when this is really challenging, which I think it is for a lot of families, getting through the to-dos in the morning, involve your child in terms of deciding what the order of events is going to be, being able to give them some autonomy in the decision-making process. If they're at a level where they can participate in that process can be helpful, because then they have some ownership over it and feel like it's not just a command coming down at them, but they're part of the process as well.
Thank you. All right, next question. Our son has issues going to sleep and staying asleep. We used to use melatonin, now have moved to clonidine and trazodone. We're going to do a sleep study soon. Will he always be on medication, or is this something we can hopefully wean off in the future? Thanks.
I can take that one too. So I'm so glad to hear it sounds like you're going through a process of figuring out the why for sleep difficulties. We know that individuals with autism spectrum disorder have challenges with sleep. This can start in early childhood and can be a challenge moving forward, but it's really important to think about the why. So sometimes that can be an underlying medical sleep disorder, which it sounds like you're evaluating through the process of a sleep study and a sleep medicine evaluation. So if you're not familiar, there are actually physicians who specialize in sleep medicine. So they can be a really important resource if you're concerned about an underlying medical sleep disorder. But assuming that process is being evaluated as well, there are other contributors to sleep difficulties. So challenges in terms of some of the sensory aspects of sleep and difficulty with self-regulation and settling at the end of the day. We often think about a first step in addressing sleep around behavioral supports. So there's a number of strategies that can be helpful with promoting a consistent sleep bedtime routine, utilizing some of the visual schedules and other visual strategies to help children know what to expect around bedtime and be able to anticipate when that's coming. Being able to work on some of those important sleep hygiene things that all of us as adults need to think about in our lives, but it's especially important for children who have autism to be thinking about those pieces. So, are there screens involved? What's our evening routine look like? Caffeine, beverages, all of those pieces of sleep hygiene are really important to think about and address here. As to the question as to whether medications will always be needed, that's a very individualized question that we wouldn't be able to answer without knowing your child. But certainly sleep challenges can wax and wane over time, but our hope would be by implementing some effective behavioral strategies and addressing if there is any underlying medical sleep disorder, that we would be able to make progress over time and that the issues would lessen as we address those areas of need.
Oh, question?
My sons also have sleep problems, and they use screen time quite often with school and at home, and we found that it was helpful to have a blue blocking filter added to their glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually looking at getting just plain blue blocking features for one who doesn't wear glasses, so I don't know if they've looked into that.
So a parent adding that for her children, you have utilized a blue filter on lenses, blue blocking filter, and that has been helpful perhaps. So, and
add that to a glasses prescription,
and that it can be added to a glasses prescription. So,
or maybe even just have that be the only thing that you can add it to a screen, but if you are exposed to a lot of different screens,
Mhm.
just with glasses.
okay. So, but that it can be added to different kinds of screens, and so, okay. But did you have a question too, or just that? All right, thank you. And I'm being told we're at time, so that we can keep moving to our next panel. If we had a couple more, if we didn't answer your question, we certainly will be out here and happy to address that. So, okay. Thank you very much.
So days like today would not be possible without the support and partnership of our community partners. And so the Waisman Center has been partnering with the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin for 14 years to put on our Day with the Experts focused on autism. I'd like to invite the new executive director of the Autism Society, Jackie Moen, to come and share just a little bit with you about the Autism Society in our area.
Hello. Thank you, Teresa. We're delighted to once again partner with the Waisman Center to host this great event. And I'll be brief so that we can get to the panel of experts, which is my favorite part of the day. I'd like to share an update on the board of directors at the Autism Society. Danielle Tolzman, who has been our board president for numerous years and who has championed greatly for the community, has hit her term limit and has recently stepped down. However, thankfully, she'll remain on the board. Nancy Allar, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with for her years of dedication to the autism community, has become the new president of the board. So we're in good hands. We're so very grateful to both of them and for all the volunteers at the Autism Society. You are our lifeline. So thank you for your hours and hours of dedication and service to this community. And can we please acknowledge those folks? I'm honored to be entrusted to lead this organization. We exist to be part of the network that's supporting your needs. This is our organization. To the parents here today, I am you. My life looks a lot like your life, as do my kids. My son looks like your self-advocate, and my other son looks like your child who is yet to access his voice. And this is our organization. It's here to support us. Over the course of the upcoming year, I would like to be in all 10 of the counties we serve. And I invite you to join us when I'm in your county. We'd like to know what's working for you, what more support could we be participating in. And the self-advocates, I'm especially talking to you. I want to know how we can better support the lives you're dreaming of and hopefully living. If you have good support, come tell us about it. Hopefully we'll learn from you so that the other counties that are having a harder time can learn of better options. And if you're interested in helping us organize a town hall in your county, please stop at the table out front or call the Autism Society and leave your contact information. Because what springs forth from these town hall meetings will be the initiatives we work on moving forward. So again, please show up and share your experience and help us make a meaningful difference. And also, if you are not currently a member of the Autism Society, please consider doing so. Every month, the Autism Society hosts many events, workshops, trainings. You can look at go to our website, autismsouthcentral.org, and also like us on Facebook and keep informed on what's being offered. One such event coming up is a collaborative effort with the Waisman Center, and it's on Saturday, January 27th. It's entitled A Spectrum of Connection, Relationships, What's Not Working, How to Fix It, and Other Topics. It's described as a conversation where topics could include social skills, dating, online dating, sexuality, friendships, and more, targeting it's targeting teens, older teens, and young adults who identify as being on the spectrum. We've also recently added a tab on our website called In the Community, where you can learn about opportunities that are happening in your area. We hope to expand on the number of organizations that send us their information so we can get families out enjoying themselves and doing fun things in the community. I also encourage the more outlying counties to please send us your information so we can disseminate it, help disseminate it for you. Also under in the community, also under in the community is a tab called Advocacy News, and we're populating that with legislative news and action alerts. Lastly, I personally want to invite you to participate on the walk on April 22nd, One Walk, Big Strides. It's time we look beyond autism awareness and autism acceptance to further include empowerment and respect. People on the autism spectrum deserve no less from their community. So please join us in helping to shift that narrative on what it means to live on the autism spectrum. So now, on to our panelists. Be sure to stop by our table if you have any thoughts or questions you'd like to share. And thank you very much for coming today.
So now for one of the most exciting parts of the morning. My name is Lindsay McCary and I'm a psychologist here at the Waisman Center, and I'm very honored to moderate this panel of experts. So I really would like to start by having them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about who they are and where they're from and where they are on their journey of life. So Scott, if you would like to start.
Certainly. Hi, my name is Scott Allen. I have a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome officially. I have been a self-advocate for 18 years or so, and I've been doing public speaking about the autism spectrum for about 16 years. I am the first person known to be on the spectrum who was ever a member of the Autism Society of Wisconsin at the state executive board level. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I have been working here at the Waisman Center for about a year and a half, most recently as an associate outreach specialist, in which I help to do public presentations as well as to co-facilitate an empowerment group for UW-Madison students who are on the spectrum. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
My name is Bradley Wing. I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 4, and right now I'm currently working for the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, in which I work at the Weights and Measures Laboratory. I work in both the fuel quality side and the metrology side. And in the fuel side, I do the octane testing for like gasoline, as well as for the cloud point testing on number 2 diesels. And in the metrology side, I do the calibration of weight kits. And then I think that being in the state definitely is wonderful. It's definitely a laid-back atmosphere, and it's, I mean, they treat their employees well, and it's definitely can't ask for much better than that.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kayla Sheezer. I am currently live in Madison, and I have a younger brother who is on the spectrum. And currently I'm in my master's program at UW-Madison for social work. And lastly, I'm doing an internship here at the Waisman Center in the Autism Treatment Program.
Good morning. My name is Kika Bar, and I live in McFarland with my family. My son, I'm the mother of Marcus. Marcus was diagnosed as being autistic at the age of 5. I'm very grateful and excited to be here. I have already learned a lot, and I hope to share some helpful information with you throughout the day. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you everyone for coming and good morning. My name is Marcus Barr. I was diagnosed with PDD-NOS. I'm currently attending 2 schools actually, McFarland High School, in which I am now a sophomore at 15 years old, and Common Threads. I can't remember the full name, but it's a school for people like me, basically.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Hope Huizinga. I live here in Madison, Wisconsin, and I work part-time at Walgreens and have worked for Walgreens for going on 6 years since May of 2012. I'm involved in a couple different, have been involved in a couple different groups and organizations in regards to autism and awareness and support. One of them being with Nancy Alar, who I'm sure a lot of you know here. I have worked with her and the Awesome social group for a couple years now, I believe. This is my first time being at an event like this, and being a female on the spectrum, seeing as how most individuals on the spectrum, 3 out of 4 are male, so having the opportunity like this I'm very grateful for it. Some of the things I like to do and I enjoy doing are writing. In fact, I'm a avid fan fiction writer and fan of it. So I also enjoy a lot of more geeky stuff. I'm into comic books, TV shows, movies. I also have quite the interest in anime and manga. So if there's any anime lovers out there, I can relate. Just a lot of different things I am grateful for in life, having such a solid support group and a lot of friends that I can rely on, and also having mentioned that support group, considering there are a lot of different facets of who I am, a lot of them being personal to autism, but one of them that I would like to acknowledge today, with permission from the moderators of this panel, is the fact that I identify as LGBT in addition to being autistic, which I feel is important because not only am I autistic, but I am also identify as LGBT, which is both crucial parts of who I am as a person. So,
thank you. So the next question that we'll talk about is actually from the audience. So if you all can talk about the experience of either the diagnosis or learning about the diagnosis of autism, or how you talked about that with your family member. So Scott, if you want to start.
Sure. So in my case, I was not diagnosed with Asperger's until I was 15. That being said, my parents did recognize that something was up with me, something was different from a pretty early age. But it wasn't until I was 12, and then from 12 through 14, that my parents had me see a psychologist, kind of under false pretenses, actually. They didn't tell me why I was going there. They didn't give me the real reason. But they wanted to know more about what was going on with me because I was having difficulty in school, not academically, but in terms of social relationships and being bullied a lot. And it was sort of a mixed bag. But it was after I had left the relationship with that psychologist that the psychologist continued to meet with my mother for some time after that, and eventually mentioned to my mother that I might have quote-unquote autism. And she said that she hadn't mentioned this previously because parents tend to freak out when they hear that word, so she didn't want to impose that label. But that is when my mother started looking into it and found about the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome and talked to me about it. I remember the conversation that we had riding in our van one night, and she asked me something to the effect of, what would you say if I told you that there was a reason for why you're different? And at that point, I was enough of an empiricist to know that, well, if that's where the evidence leads, then that could be a reasonable conclusion. And besides that, I mean, for me, it was like, oh, well, so there is a justification for how weird I am. This is not just me being unaccountably strange. There really is a rational explanation for it. And so from there, I did eventually, I got diagnosed actually through a research study at the University of Pittsburgh. So this was like a full battery of tests, intelligence testing, reflex testing, all kinds of stuff, brain scan, the works. So I know that there is something different about my neurology. Although that being said, having looked into the nature of how diagnosis works and the fact that really the DSM is a work of professional opinion, not a work of science, and all this other kind of stuff, that it's the best thing that we have going right now, but it does have flaws that need to be addressed. And I say that because I do want to mention that in my case, at least, Linguistically speaking, I do actually reject the word autism because the word autism, first of all, has a lot of historical baggage for a number of reasons of a convoluted history. And also, the word literally means selfism, or metaphorically, it means withdrawnism. And I'm not withdrawn. I'm actually very keenly interested in the world around me and in people around me and in sharing my life and connecting with others. So for me to have the label of autism is a burden that I find to be insulting because it's a false description of what I am. So that's my experience with diagnosis and the nature of what a diagnostic label means.
Thank you, Scott. So Brad, if you want to...
As I previously mentioned, I was diagnosed at the age of 4, and I learned that I had autism when I was at age 7, because my mom worked at a place called Families with Autism, and so that's kind of how I knew I had autism, and so I was like, this was when I was like first grade, and I also started receiving in-home therapy, going to OT, PT, speech therapy. I would say that OT and PT were like my favorite because there was a lot of like physical activity with the law, like going like with like the sensory room, like trampoline, loft, pillows. My least favorite was probably doing like the reading, and so, but because my comprehension skills were weak at the time, but now they've improved thanks to like my teachers from K through 12, and also I took a college reading strategies course at MAT at Madison College, and that helped significantly. And
Thank you, Brad. So Kayla, if you want to talk about your experience as a sibling.
So mine's a little bit unique. There's 2 years difference between my brother and I, and so I guess that's a little foggy of the diagnosing, but from what I've talked to about my parents is that in the 90s there really wasn't much research. It was just kind of cutting edge, and so there wasn't a lot of supports out there for my family. Luckily, my mom went to school for special education and had kind of a background on disabilities and autism, and so I definitely give her 100% credit for, seeing the differences in my brother and reaching out to different clinics to be able to get him diagnosed. He originally wasn't first diagnosed. He had PDNOS because he had some of the characteristics but not all of them, and then once there were more characteristics that aligned more toward, as they called it before, Asperger's, he was able to get services. And just having that aspect from being involved with my family then and knowing what I know now could have been beneficial in the services that are provided in the community right now. But I think my brother has done marvelous things, and the supports that the community and the schools have allowed him to grow and be able to move on to college and to his career.
Thank you.
My experience with Marcus's diagnosis wasn't as wonderful as as I heard Kayla explain about her brother. We knew that Marcus had some very challenging sensory integration issues, as early as about 2 years old. We were lucky to have, within our school district, an early childhood program with someone who was very caring, very knowledgeable, and sort of kind of guided us through what were the next steps, towards understanding Marcus a little better. We set up an appointment for cognitive testing with the UW Hospital Neuropsychology Department. That was his first autism diagnosis that he received at about age 4. And that was not, I mean, we basically said, yeah, he's in the spectrum, here's some paperwork, here's some resources, good luck. And that was a little challenging. It wasn't until we came to the Waisman Center when he was 5 that we had a lot of help with just designating, here's what you do first, and here are the kinds of support systems that are available. And then since then, it's been you know, a long but very rewarding journey for us to learn and practice a lot of patience, you know, and a lot of and experience the rewards that come our way, because the rewards are very, very significant, and they come a lot.
Thank you. So Marcus, if you want to talk about your perspective.
I always, excuse me if it's difficult to pontificate my past experiences, I always knew I was different in some way. For instance, I was always a very angry little child. always yelling at things. And the only way I could be calmed down, well, one of the only ways, is if I were offered 2 blue M&Ms. Blue was my favorite color, and 2 seemed like a lot, so only natural 2 blue M&Ms. And I can't really think of my memory of when I was diagnosed, but when I really started to notice I was different from the other children, that I was different from the other children, was around maybe middle school, where I started like swearing in classes, and I was given AIDS, and well, not HIV, but like I'm not getting sick, people. Like I got some special education assistance, and like they put me in this. No, go on, knock it down. They put me in this little padded room, which sort of made it seem like an old-timey insane asylum, which I wasn't a big fan of. And I started getting more and more suspended a lot, and I swear to God, the director of student services hated me. But that's irrelevant. And finally, when I got to high school, I'm currently with a special education assistant who is not only a longtime family friend, but is also helping me learn about good morals and how to treat others and what to be expected from others.
Thank you. So, Hope, if you want to talk about learning about your diagnosis.
Well, first and foremost, I feel it's important to also mention, like everyone else has, that I definitely felt different growing up. I struggled with a lot of different things in regards to social interactions, communication, difficulties with motor skills, like a lot of other individuals on the spectrum deal with. And I always felt different, you know. I think most of that is probably in part due to the fact that not everybody had the same challenges I did, and they definitely noticed that. The first time that I had actually met another individual on the spectrum was when I was in middle school. It was 6th grade. There was this point in the school day where we would always have this, I want to call it a free period, where we would meet some of our classmates and get together and learn more about them, get to know them. One of these classmates that was in this designated group of mine, his name was Jacob, and he was autistic. He had more struggles than I did, so it was harder for him. And he was also nonverbal at that time. I don't know if at any point in the future, since I've last seen him, whether he's become verbal or not. I certainly hope so. But like I said, I haven't seen him, so I wouldn't know for sure. But he had this whole presentation laid out that kind of mapped out how his disability affects him and how it shapes his day-to-day life. And well, afterwards, I felt like I can't really describe it. I have this sort of feeling like a connection I have to someone else. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that. every so often, but it usually happens when come across another person is autistic. I can't really describe it other than the fact it's like a sense of kinship or something. But aside from that, I immediately afterwards kind of went home and told my parents about it. And until that point, my mother, the way she explained it, she was waiting for me to come across someone who also was autistic to learn more about the condition and how it affects people before telling me about my diagnosis. And while it was hard for me to grasp at the time, being a child and all still, now that I'm an adult, I'm very appreciative to the fact that she did that for me. It gave me a chance to live without the burden of the knowledge that I am so different, and I will always have struggles of my own that will shape me for probably the rest of my life. So, and aside from that though, I can only say that in some cases, having the knowledge of the diagnosis can be a gift, because you can give back to the community and you can support the community of autism because you connect with it and you identify with it. But also in other cases, it can be difficult because not everybody is as open-minded, and some people come from strict, narrow-minded upbringings, and that can make things difficult to connect with them. So, thank you.
So our next question is about your experience with school, and if you can highlight things that schools have done well to support you, or areas that you might like to see some improvement.
So in my case, from kindergarten all the way through high school, all of my schooling was at Catholic school, so I did not have an IEP. There were not a lot of resources for somebody with my kinds of difficulties, and I didn't have a diagnosis at that time until, between my freshman and sophomore years of high school anyway. So most of what I can say about the school environment is that the greatest benefits that I had really were from individual teachers who recognized that I had potential and invested in encouraging me and letting me know that I had something worthwhile to be able to contribute, and that I should be continuing to invest myself in my academics and other sorts of issues. There were some teachers who were a lot less helpful. There were some teachers who were not understanding at all, and who believed that my difficulties amounted essentially to character flaws, which is kind of a broader issue in society as well, but that's still a relatively common assumption or set of attitudes. Some specific examples, just kind of smaller things, because I think that sometimes really, for many people on the spectrum, it's not so much any one big difference. I mean, for some people it is, but in many other cases, it's 1,000 little things that are difficult to explain to other people as to why they're so significant to you, or just to be able to help other people to relate and understand what you're going through. And so sometimes just little things like the fact that many people on the autism spectrum are not especially interested in reading fiction, more interested in nonfiction. And I do read some of both, but when I was in 8th grade, I had a literature class that we were supposed to read fiction and do like journal writings about this. And I had a really great teacher at that time who was willing to compromise with me, that I could do most of my readings on nonfiction things as long as I did some fiction readings as well. So that really was just a little accommodation between me and her, more or less, that was really helpful to me, because it let me do something that I was strong in, and let me do something that I didn't have to kind of muddle through figuring out something that I wasn't interested in. And a similar example in some ways from high school, I was in a Spanish class where the seating arrangements were assigned, and those assigned seats were changed on a regular basis, which for me is really frustrating, because when I find a seat that I like being there every time, every class. Even in college, I had a little war with somebody once, and I was getting to class like 30 or 40 minutes early just to make sure I could be in my spot, because they always sat there too. So that's really significant to me, and so this was after my diagnosis for the high school example, and that teacher let me keep that one spot, and what other kids kind of asked other high school kids, I should say, asked about what was going on, she just said, well, there are medical reasons, and left it at that. And so I really appreciated that, because having to move seats was a stressor on my learning, and to be able to have that kind of small accommodation was significant. So there's definitely lots of big things that need to be considered as high priorities, but there's lots of little stuff that you need to know somebody as an individual to really recognize what is going to be a benefit to them, and why it's significant to them. So.
Yeah. So Brad, things that have gone well with school and how they've supported you?
Well, of course, special education. I would obviously go outside of the classroom to take an exam, in which I had a special education teacher in 6th grade, and after that she helped me with homework for about 10 years. She was like kind of like a tutor and a family friend. She also helped with other non-academic things, such as like finances and social groups. And I also have had times where I would get modified assignments or modified exams, or extended time on assignments. But one thing that really helped me was graphic organizers, which like a writing process. They call it step up to writing, like your introduction, your body paragraphs, and your conclusion. And I feel like special ed in my district was wonderful, which but they do challenge their students to be independent at times, especially like if they're busy or if there's no one else. But I took chemistry in high school, which that one I had to kind of do more on my own, because the special education teachers weren't like specialized in that area, and that was a more so that kind of prepared me for college, in which I had no IEP. And so once you're out of high school, IEP's gone. But however, they do at MATC Madison College, they have disability resource specialists, which you can have some accommodations, such as accommodated testing. You can have extended time on tests. You can get large print or braille, and there's a tutoring center you can go to at Madison College. You can also get preferable class seating at MATC. You can have a note taker, but at Madison College they provide their disability resources very well, and I want to thank my 6th grade special education teacher for getting me to where I am today.
Great, thank you.
Our experience with education for Marcus is sort of a mixed bag. We had, to start, we had a very good early childhood person that helped us, get to his diagnosis and guide him in positive ways towards the next step. But then we had a period there, between late primary and through middle school that was extremely challenging as to the expectations of the school. And I think Scott brought up, some questions of morals, and I myself got, tagged as a bad mom that didn't really wasn't doing a very good job placing boundaries, for my son. So that was very frustrating. I am very grateful that we had Common Threads right in McFarland, where they helped bridge, that communication, and helped repair some of the damage that those negative interactions, through all those years had on Marcus's self-esteem. And I think that we still have a long ways to go. I think that this mentality of let's help this poor child be better and like us must be changed to let's get this child to share its strengths to the rest of the community, because they certainly have a lot to offer.
Like my mother said, my school district has been kind of hit or miss. My first special education teacher, one of the greatest ladies I know, really good. Second grade, meh. Third grade was a female dog. I did not like her that much, but we carried on in middle school, and in middle school was when we started slipping. I previously mentioned our director of student services completely hated me. The mother of another student who was in the spectrum, I don't even think he had a case manager, hated us. And I don't think my special ed teacher was too keen on me either. Really, the only good part about middle school was my aide. And what they've done to help is that my assistants can write for me, which is a problem because I'm left-handed. So sometimes it's hard for me to write when my hand gets a little jittery. Or sometimes it's hard when some of the other students are using their cellular devices in class when they shouldn't be. Hate these people. But I look forward to seeing what my junior year and eventually my senior year and soon to be my college can bring me.
Thank you, Marcus. So Hope, if you can talk about what schools have done well to support you.
Well, schools have done well to support me in a number of ways. I was always a very avid learner. The only problem with that is I had, like many autistic individuals, a massive tendency to procrastinate. Most of that was due to the fact that I would get sidetracked. My mind would kind of get focused on a tangent, something I was really excited about. Whether it was this TV show that I was watching, or a book, or something I saw on the internet, like an article, how it intrigued me, or something or other. I had a very, very active mind when I was a student. Sometimes it helped, sometimes it didn't. So being able to advocate for me on that and inform other teachers of that particular struggle that I go through was very helpful. Not to say that there were a few select teachers that weren't as understanding, because unfortunately not all people are created with equal mindsets, so obviously there's always going to be struggles in that regard. But I can honestly say that I've had more positive, inspiring teachers than I have had ones that have labeled me as the troublesome procrastinator. So definitely had a lot of very good experiences in that regard. The single most memorable experience that I had as a student growing up with my teachers that were very positive and supportive of me. I was in third grade. We had literally just finished up the last quarter of the school year. Summer was just about to start, right on the corner. And my teacher introduced me and my mother to a summer camp called the Wisconsin Lions Camp. It's this summer camp that I went to consecutively for literally 10 years every summer. The staff there are amazing at creating a safe, easygoing, and overall fun environment for the campers there. And each of them are incredibly open-minded, because the vast majority of them are actually going to school to become a special education instructor or teacher. So they're all there to get experience in that regard. And that makes them very qualified to be there as staff members. And honestly, I can say without a doubt that each year that I at each school year, no matter what struggles I went through, what challenges, what things I had to make leaps and bounds to overcome, that was one constant I could always look forward to. The week I would spend at that summer camp were literally the years that I would look forward to, and the summers I spent there were literally the best summers I have ever had. So definitely would recommend it to any parents and family members that have young children with autism.
So we only have about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to skip to our very last question. So if you can talk about what you value most about yourself or your family member, and what some of your hopes for the future are.
So, in some ways it's difficult for me to say what I value most about myself because our society kind of has mixed messages about what one is allowed to value in oneself. So if I say that I value my intelligence, that sounds like I'm boasting, as opposed to other people saying, oh, you're smart. Well, then that's okay, and I should accept that about myself. So, so it gets kind of confusing. I would say that intelligence is one of the things that I value about myself in a general way, but I think that really what I do with that, what I do with my sense of compassion and social justice, which you know, I was bullied a lot, ostracized and harassed throughout my formative years, and that really was a forge that gave me the sense of social justice that I have in many ways, because I did not want to inflict on others what was inflicted on me. And so the things that I value about myself are my ability to communicate effectively about these complex issues, to be able to bridge between neurotypical and autism spectrum perspectives, and to really be able to help other people clarify and contextualize what they're going through, to give them the words and concepts that help them understand themselves and their situation better, so that they can be more confident and feel more capable of contributing to society and more capable of pursuing their own goals. So those kinds of things, that nexus of abilities rather than any one thing, I think is what I value most about myself. As for future goals, right now I'm in the process of trying to figure out whether to do a conventional PhD or a like custom PhD here at UW-Medicine. I've got a lot of people that I'm going to have to talk to figure out more about that, but I'm interested in cultural questions about the autism spectrum, because we talk so much about it in a way that pathologizes or medicalizes it, and I think it's so much deeper than that in terms of what kind of values we have and how we talk about these sorts of things, and why we devalue people on the autism spectrum in the way that society in general does. So I'd like to be able to do research that allows me to connect with that while also being connected to advocacy, the advocacy movement in a continual kind of way. So,
thank you.
Well, some of the things I feel I'm most I value about myself, I'm most proud of is I feel like I have come a long way with academically, socially, with reading, with being. I feel like I'm much more. I feel like I'm pretty fit now, and I feel like I'm very proud of how well I do with. I feel I'm very proud with where I am in life, and I feel like what I'm doing is very important to our state, and with the testing I do is to make sure gas stations have good quality gas, and make sure people are getting what they pay for it, like the grocery stores or at scale places, and so I definitely now live on my own in an apartment. I live with my cousin, and now I feel I'm taking care of my own expenses, my own like rent, and doing my own cooking, doing my own like commuting to work, doing my own like gym membership, and I feel like life's going really well for me right now.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. What I most value about my brother is just the insight that he brings on a daily basis. He has so much perspective that I've never would have thought of before. I value his honesty. I feel like I'm an honest person, but you know, he'll just say it right there, say blunt and honest what he thinks. Just the knowledge that he brings to education and to the sports realm. He's very knowledgeable, and you could sit with him for a good hour plus and talk to him about the Packers, the Badgers, the Brewers. And so leading into that, what I hope for him is he's graduating in May, and so I hope he's able to connect and use those tools that he's learned at his college and throughout life thus far, and be able to put them to good use, and having connections with more individuals, and being able to live on his own, and get married in the future if he so chooses, and knowing that, you know, family is always going to be there for him, because that's a big component of that we have together, and knowing that I'm always going to be there, his #1 advocate, to help, and just being able to have a positive, fulfilling life, and knowing that he's not any less. He might have challenges and he might have differences than everybody else, but he deserves a life like everybody else.
Thank you.
I have 3 children, and so our family was always had this dynamic of bantering, a little bit of bantering, and a little bit of each one of us had a role to play. My husband was the one who screamed a lot and set things straight, and I was the handler. My oldest was the troublemaker. My middle one was the star child, but Marcus was the truth setter. Whenever we got stuck with debates, long-ending debates that never went anywhere, all he had to do is just chime in with one simple statement, and then he always nailed it. So, right, always, and it was always right too. So, how Marcus is special to me, I'm not going to go too much into that, otherwise I'm going to get choked up. But ever since I've had him, I reflect more. I care more and I hope more. So I don't know what is not to love about that.
Well, sort of like my mother said, my candor about things, like if you're being the south end of a northbound horse, I will tell you. Another thing I value about myself is my ability to find a deeper meaning into things. Like, perhaps something isn't just something someone sloppily made together. Maybe it's something deeper, or maybe even philosophical. Another thing I really value is that sometimes I'm a devil's advocate. Like, if somebody says something really stupid, and if someone laughs, I will play to my candor and say, "Why'd you laugh at that?" And I'll just say it wasn't funny. So, yeah. As for what I want to do with my life, I'm not really sure. I like animals. I have 2 cats and a fish. I'm not sure if I want to be a vet, or I like history. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, was a history teacher, and living like right next to him, I soaked up a lot of history lessons when he'd tell me to sit down and shut up as he'd learn me something. Another thing I'm getting into so far is biology, so I'm not really sure yet. But I'll probably figure out in some time later, but who knows.
Thank you.
Well, I personally have a lot of things that I value in my life, and who I am as a person. First and foremost would be that my life has been surrounded by warm, loving family and friends. Pretty crazy big family in particular. It gets a little crazy in my household with all the extended family. whack jobs. Anyway, but they've always been very, very supportive of me. They've always gone out of their way to learn more about my condition and to make me feel comfortable and supported. And that's by far the most important thing that I value in my life and who I am as a person. And a few other things would be the fact that I am so, as a person, open-minded and welcoming. I have had a lot of circumstances occur in my life that have challenged the way I think about other people, and have since enabled me to judge people based only on their actions and not things that they cannot control, such as where they were born, what ethnic group or nationality they may come from. I mean, I don't judge people based on any of that. In fact, I have a number of group of friends that are from many different ethnic groups, and we get along fabulously. So I just simply judge them based on how they act and how they treat other people. I try to do that to the best of my ability, because honestly, at the end of the day, that's all we can really do. We can only control what we do as a person. And aside from that, the other things that I value are the fact that I don't have any difficulty, and that I have the ability to work and to live independently and to manage my time, finances, and home, and the ability to drive, the ability to make plans with others and not have others dictate what I should do or what I have to do. So I'm very grateful for that, because I know that not everybody on the spectrum has the ability to do that and to be independent. So thank you.
So let's give a final round of applause for our panelists for being here. Thank you.